Microsoft Azure gives us key cloud-based infrastructure that we need. We made a big decision to break down our existing platform, which was one big, large, monolithic lump of software, into a microservice architecture.
This Black Friday, we served 167 million requests in the 24 hours. Average page response times came down by about half a second. That's what you're looking for in a new platform.
Azure provides the glue that brings together the data from our internal on-premise systems and join that with information held in the cloud. We use Azure Application Services and also Azure SQL Database to provide the data resources to the application. To achieve single sign-in, we have federated across from Azure Active Directory to our Oracle Access Management.
And that was fantastic. That was the equivalent of putting a very old car on the moon.
We wanted to make it really easy for our customers to get meaning out of their data. The industrial Internet of Things is different only in the fact that our customers have very stringent requirements about how data moves. We want one place to egress that data that we can lock down. The advantage of it being Azure is IoT Hubs makes it very easy to get that data in. Power BI makes it very easy to visualize that data once it's there.
It allows us to put a data scientist in a box.
Microsoft helped us achieve our digital transformation. It's put us over the top. Geico's been growing leaps and bounds, and we have not had any issues whatsoever from a capacity perspective because of the on-demand capability and scalability of Azure. We can handle the volume. We're like, bring it on. We want more.
Please welcome Corporate Vice President, Microsoft Azure, Jason Zander.
Thank you. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Cloud Infrastructure General Session. Very excited to have you here. I'd like to welcome all of you and add my welcome to Ignite. I love doing this conference because we've got a ton of great material here and we've built it specifically for you. And so I'm always eager to hear your feedback and show off some of the new things that the team's been done. I'm Jason. I run the engineering team worldwide for Azure. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, at Microsoft, our mission is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. Now, this mission has a special meaning for this audience, I think particularly in the era of cloud computing. We are building Azure so that collectively we can deliver new possibilities to our organizations and enable all of them to achieve more. Now, we have a long-standing relationship with all of you, and we believe this is a new and exciting era, particularly for IT. So in this session, we're going to go deeper on cloud and core infrastructure that we have. Let's get started. Now, you saw this particular slide actually framed from both Scott and Satya today. And that core that we have there is a substrate. It's Azure. It's the thing that we run our own services on, what we call our first-party services. That's like Office 365 and Xbox Live and those. We also want to make sure that it's there for you. So any learning and the scale that we get is very applicable to you as well. And we have these core tenets of productive, hybrid, intelligent, and trusted. And we're going to drill deeper on those as we go through, and we have a several set of demos and some examples for you as part of this session. And I hope to get you then sent off into some of the even more detailed sessions to learn everything about the rest of the technology. Now, we've built Azure to be ready for all of your IT needs, and many have begun their cloud journey and often have started off with dev and test, and then expanded that usage to go and protect your core infrastructure, doing things like backup and archive, disaster recovery, and those have been really awesome usages of the technology. But cloud usage today goes far beyond these use cases. In fact, we believe that enterprises are driving a second wave of cloud adoption. They're putting their most demanding systems in the cloud, including mission-critical line-of-business applications and customer-facing applications, key data workloads that are leveraging AI and PBI, data warehousing, high-performance computing, and many, many more. These are workloads and applications that are critical to the business. Your business stops running if they don't work. Now, we are the preferred cloud for the enterprise, and we have more than 90% of the Fortune 500 choosing the Microsoft Cloud. And today at Ignite, we're making several interesting new announcements that expand these capabilities and allow you to go even further. Now, the first thing I'll start off with is that we are a partner-led company. In fact, we have over 100,000 partners worldwide that we work with. And chances are you've been leveraging some of this rich ecosystem that you see here, a lot of the partners that, frankly, even sometimes we actually compete with. But we know that your workloads are based on a variety of different types of vendors, different ISVs, and we need to make sure that your applications and your IT estate can really run fantastically. Now, what we've done is we've also introduced the Azure Marketplace, and we have thousands of solutions on the Marketplace, with more being added every day. Now, one example of a business-critical workload is SAP. And in fact, we've actually been partnering with SAP for over 20 years now. SQL Server and Windows Server are actually top platforms for SAP to be able to run on today. Now, Azure provides the most performant and scalable cloud for your SAP applications, from the existing NetWeaver environments off into the new workloads that SAP has created with things like S4 and HANA. Now, Azure's SAP support allows your business to scale when you need to. For example, you can handle things like quarter and year-end close where I need to spike and handle that big load right at the end. And again, if I don't do that right, I can get delisted, especially in financial packages. But I only have to pay for the resources that you need when you need them. Now, I'd like to take a look at an example of this, and Rio Tinto, I think, is just a really great example. There is one of the largest mining and metals companies in operation around the world today. And Rio Tinto operates the largest SAP deployment in the mining industry as well. Now, they embarked on their digital transformation by moving from their on-premises solution to the cloud in order to get, realize more workload flexibility. Now, the migration of SAP and the associated systems to Azure, as well as a move to SQL Server, has enabled significant cost savings for them, in addition to giving them that flexibility that they wanted. Let's roll the video.
Rio Tinto is a global mining and metals company. We operate out of the majority of the continents on the globe except for Antarctica. A few years ago, we undertook digital transformation across our business, particularly focused on our enterprise systems. And Microsoft Azure was chosen as our preferred partner in this area.
In 2015, Rio Tinto selected Accenture to be their partner to drive the transformation and migration of their existing enterprise IT services from on-premise data centers to a cloud-based everything-as-a-service model. And the most significant part of that move was the migration of the SAP and associated systems. This is the largest public cloud implementation of SAP.
We've got two major environments. One environment is 8 terabytes in database size. The other environment is about 7.5 terabytes. We were moving the database from IBM DB2 to Microsoft SQL on the Azure platform.
SAP for us is mission critical. We run our entire business on SAP. We have 40,000 users, 365-day-a-year operations, 24/7. So even a few minutes of outage disrupts our business. The reliability of Azure has allowed us to continue with those requirements and meet our business needs. The intent of the change was really about delivering both flexibility and cost savings to the business, and so we've achieved both of those outcomes. So Azure is certainly a technology that we are looking at taking more advantage of as a company.
As an engineer, I love those machines. It would be great if you could go take a tour there sometime. But I think the mission critical part of this is just fantastic because if you think about it, you're doing mining, and honestly, if you can't get SAP to run properly inside of this environment, those trains that you saw in the picture, the ships that ship the material around there, they're just stuck. They cannot move. And so you can't think of something that's even more critical. Now, what we've designed in order to run this environment is several different options. We start off with the on-demand solutions that we have. G-Series is a great example of this. You have up to 0.5 terabytes of RAM, and this is really a good one for scenarios like dev and test. The new M-Series, which hopefully you saw Corey's demo this morning, Corey Sanders showed off M-Series, and you can see there we're up to about 3.8 terabytes of RAM that is available. Now that one's going to be awesome, especially for things like production environments, and that gives you your on-demand. Now what we've also seen is we've had significant interest in saying, look, my data sets are getting bigger, I'm storing more and more, and I need to run even more of this inside of the system. So we have built out purpose-built hardware for that. Our large instance support for SAP, and our latest version of this actually scales up to 20 terabytes of RAM. That's right, 20 terabytes of RAM. That's how large that is. So think about your data sets and how big they are. Well, if you need more, let me know. I've had asked for more. But That's a pretty awesome machine. Now, underneath of all this, we want to make sure that we've done a really good job with the security and the operations management. And this is something we've built into the product, as opposed to being kind of a bolt-on like you might see in other solutions from other vendors. Now, we believe that with that, you can do things like disaster recovery. I can do, backups and all the sort of stuff that I need to do, again, for this kind of application. Now, with some of the work that we've got here, we've seen companies realize up to a 75% TCO, especially around dev test environments, because I'm just spinning up what I need, and I can spin it back down after I'm finished. And then finally, you can take advantage of things like machine learning and Power BI to go look for not just the data that I have in the systems, but I also want to get insights, because at the end of the day, that's what really improves my business. So we believe in the end, no other cloud provider delivers such a comprehensive and integrated support for this environment. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at this in action. I'd like to invite Mark Skog up on stage to show us more. Here's Mark.
Thanks, Jason. So what I'm about to show you here is the ability to run your SAP systems on Azure, and we're going to have a number of demos that we're going to walk through. To start off with, I'm going to talk about our ability to run all of the large SAP systems on both on-demand as well as our purpose-built systems that are SAP certified for the infrastructure. Now, when we look at the systems that were up and running here, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is normally setting up an SAP environment and all the ancillary systems can take several weeks, if not months. In Azure, we're going to show you how you can set up your SAP infrastructure in just minutes. I'm going to start with Azure Portal here, and as you can see in Azure Portal, we have an intuitive design for resource creation and management, as well as a single pane of glass to monitor all of your systems. Here you see I've created my SAP dashboard for all of my relevant SAP information. I'm going to go ahead and click the plus button here to create a new resource, and I'm going to search for SAP in the marketplace. And what you're going to see here is both support for Red Hat as well as SUSE for SAP, as well as we have an image here for SAP HANA, where Microsoft and SAP work together for SAP to publish this for a fully configured SAP HANA system with applications in one click. Once we get this set up, I went ahead and pre-filled out the username and system name and a few other parameters. I wanted to show you the ability to select the virtual machines. Now, we know SAP HANA loves cores and loves memory, so I'm just going to select our larger virtual machines with at least 32 cores. And what we're going to have the ability to go through here is select one of my favorite series, the M series, that you saw demonstrated earlier today by Corey. Again, we go up to 4 terabytes of RAM with these on-demand systems. I'm just going to select the 1 terabyte system here for this demo, and we're going to move forward. On the next screen, I'm just going to select the defaults for the networking and for the storage, noting that for storage, you want to run SSD-based storage for SAP HANA for premium performance. And then it's going to run a validation. Now, this is just a single VM, but if I was running a traditional SAP landscape, I could manage all of the servers in that landscape through automation. And then we're going to purchase that, and boom, in just a few minutes, we're going to have a fully configured SAP landscape. How many people can do that today in their current environment? Now, the next step I wanted to actually walk you through is actually dev test labs. We get a lot of requests on how we can really reduce cost on non-production systems. And for every production system in SAP, you usually have 4 to 5 non-production systems for dev, test, training. And in this case, when I look at these systems, it's the entire landscape, not just one server. This is fairly unique to Azure here, and I have the ability to go ahead and manage my policies for startup and shutdown. And so in this case, if I look at them, I can run them just Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And if I need to bring them up after hours, no problem. I can just pop them up anytime I need and then shut them right back down. And average customers, again, are saving up to 75% by using dev test labs for non-production systems. The next phase is really to talk about security. And security is paramount not only to you, but to Microsoft. And hopefully you get that message loud and clear. And in this case, what we see is Azure Security Center, where I have a single pane of glass to manage all of the elements that are necessary to maintain a secure SAP infrastructure. I'm going to go ahead and select Compute here. And as I drill into Compute, you'll notice a couple of things. First of all, the SUSE systems I created, I still have a couple of those VMs. I need to apply updates to those systems. Secondly, you'll notice disk encryption is giving me a warning. This is mission-critical data. We want to make sure you can encrypt all that information. and we fully support encryption for all your SAP systems, both NetWeaver as well as the newer HANA systems, all built in native into Azure. Further, if you look at the ability to make sure we're maintaining high availability and disaster recovery, as you know, we create multiple copies of your data already in Azure, but in case of unprecedented or unplanned outages, we have the ability to back them up with native backup capabilities in Azure very easily. So here I have an S4 system, and just by clicking on backup, I only have one more click I need to enable backup for my S4 system, and we'll go ahead and run that backup. And so that shows you just the power of running the systems. Hopefully you see here in just a few minutes how easy it is to set up your entire SAP infrastructure and manage that inside of Azure. The next level is really doing all of your digital transformation for your SAP environment by leveraging all the other services available to you on Azure. So now I can leverage services like Power BI, machine learning, the bot framework, or even productivity with Office 365, fully integrated to SAP with single sign-on. Here you see a typical example where if you look at the SAP systems, about 60% of the reports you'll generate will require SAP and non-SAP data. And here I've tied that together with SAP financial data from SAP COPA, tied to demographic and weather data in Azure, and pull that in. Not only am I supporting single sign-on for SAP HANA, but I'm doing a live query against HANA, and you can see the performance here is sub-second to drill into the details. This helps me when I combine it with Azure Machine Learning to get things like my propensity to buy models and forecasting future demand. So far, hopefully you've seen some great capability built into Azure to support SAP, but there's one area I just have to show you that I'm most excited about, and this is absolutely unique to Azure. So if I look at the systems here, I'm going to show you one of our large instances. And this massive system that you're seeing here supports 16 terabytes of RAM. This is unique to Azure and bigger than any other public cloud providers even announced to go to, and this is available today. In fact, this is larger than most of the private hosting providers can provide for you today. Again, 16 terabytes of memory on this machine, 768 cores, Broadwell Xeon processors, V4, running at 3.4 gigahertz. Now, this would make for a great demo, but I really like to show you the large system. So we're not going to show you this 16-socket system. We're actually going to log into the HANA Studio here, and we're going to go into one of our 20 terabyte systems. Here you see a full 20 terabytes available to me, and I have the ability to run this system. It's got 20 sockets, 960 cores, and we're going to run a demo on this system where I've loaded 100 billion rows of sales data in, and I've got 19 million customer records in the system. So let's go ahead and first just show you that I really do have 100 billion rows of data. So if you look at this right here, I see the full 100 billion rows of data. Now, in a traditional NetWeaver environment, if I do a join on this data, a complex real-world join, I could take minutes or hours to run that query. I really want to see how fast this runs inside of the 20 terabyte node. So let's go ahead and click on this complex join, and we'll go ahead and run that query. And how long do you think it's going to take? Drum roll, please. And it is done in just over a second. Truly amazing performance on Azure with SAP. For SAP, we have you covered with Azure. Back to you, Jason.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. All right, who wants a 20 terabyte machine? Show of hands. Oh, I see lots of hands. Okay, I keep telling the team, I mean, that's a big machine. I keep telling them I do want to add a pinstripe option. I think maybe like, Azure Blue would be kind of cool. I mean, we get something that nice, you got to do something cool and kind of deck it out. All right, so as you saw in the Rio Tinto case, Accenture is one of our closest partners. They work very well with us on these sort of transformations. What you might not know is that Accenture runs one of the largest IT groups in the world. Now, Accenture has also set a very aggressive goal of having about 80% or more of their IT assets in the cloud. And to discuss more about this, I'm very pleased to introduce Andrew Wilson, who is the CIO of Accenture. Andrew. Andrew, thank you for being here today.
Good to see you, Jason. Hello, Orlando.
Very appreciate having you here. So, I think most folks could probably only guess about the size of the IT department that you're in charge of in the operations. Can you give us a little bit more of a flavor of that?
Yeah, sure. Accenture is 420,000 human workers. We're operating in most of the countries in the world. We're communicating, we're collaborating, we're being creative, and we've broken some records this year. So we like big numbers in Accenture, so we are the fastest deployer of Windows 10 on the planet, with 320,000 and rising. We have the largest OneDrive in the world at 2 petabytes. And we're famous for Skype and our collaboration, 320 million minutes of audio there. But also the new stuff, we're really excited by Teams. So Teams is beginning to change our culture. We've got about 11,000 on there. We think that will ramp up very soon as well. So a very productive, very energized digital workforce powered by Microsoft 365.
Well, that's fantastic. And I know, Andrew, you as a CIO, been an industry leader actually in trying to figure out how should we leverage the cloud and how should we move forward? And you personally have driven that. Can you tell me a little bit more about your strategy and vision around that?
Absolutely. We have, in the course of this quarter, we'll cross the 80% mark. Wow. When I say 80%, I don't mean 80% of, no disrespect, test and dev and the other things you can use to manipulate your numbers. It's 80% of all production services. So being in cloud has completely changed the nature of our organization. We had a cloud-first, cloud-only mantra for a long time. We're microservices, we're agile, we're API calls, we're serverless. And it's very much more than just finding an infrastructure as a service solution or a platform as a service. It's changing the nature and the DNA of the organization that I run. And we couldn't deliver as much or as quickly if we didn't have the power of cloud behind us.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Now, can you talk a little bit about Azure? Because we've been, as part of that journey as well, we've been partnering and collaborating pretty well on that. So tell me more about how Azure fits into your strategy.
Well, partnering with you on Azure is absolutely mission critical, as you say, Jason. I mean, if you look at what we've done together at Rio there, that's Microsoft, that's Accenture, that's Avanade in market and showing the power of cloud. Cloud is ready for prime time, it's ready for mission critical. But I wouldn't be very convincing on this stage if I couldn't claim to have got there even faster than the majority of our clients. So we've been working with yourselves on speeding up our cloud journey, looking for things like your disk encryption, looking for things like the high availability zones that we need to put those final really critical mission services into cloud. Accenture's your biggest partner, and so I've got to be there first, otherwise I won't be credible.
That's perfect. Help everybody else figure out where we should go as well. So we've also done some work around SAP, and we were just talking about some of these SAP wins in there. So can you tell us a little bit more about your strategy and what you're doing in that space?
Absolutely. We are on a S4 HANA transformation journey ourselves, and we're excited by the power that the HANA capability brings. But our HANA instance for our BW has been on HANA for the last 6 months, and more critically, especially for you, it's been on Azure Public Cloud. So over 6 months now ago, we went into production. I believe it's the largest BW on HANA of its type. I'm very interested in your 20 terabytes. I'm hoping there's a sort of party favor bag that I can take a 20 terabyte away with me.
I'm sure I can get you a trial on top of that.
I'm looking for a car. We've just run our annual fiscal close. It's, I think, certainly the smoothest I've experienced. I think we see the quality, we see the high availability, and we see the performance. So batch jobs run much more smoothly. We've got a lot more financial flexibility and contingency in an already very tight timetable. And what the cloud's done and what HANA's done and what Azure has done, powering it all, is made me look good with the CFO.
Well, we really appreciate your partnership as well. I think it's been a fantastic kind of partnership there to go figure some of this stuff out, and we appreciate the leadership you're showing there. So thank you so much, Andrew, for being here today. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Great show. Thank you. Thank you.
Now, as we go into the rest of our session, I'd like to talk about three main areas. We're going to start off talking first about core infrastructure, and then we're going to move through modern applications, and then we're going to wrap up with hybrid environments. Now, I want to kick this off on the infrastructure side, and really I'm kind of thinking about this is let's go take a tour of everything, starting off from a global view. I want to start off with the Earth, and I'll kind of make my way down into the workloads that we're ultimately going to run. So we can start off our tour, first of all, with a global view of what we have with Azure. And you would have seen earlier today that we have 42 regions around the world. Now, these regions are actually comprised of hundreds of data centers. So when you see a little blue dot on there, think of that as lots of data centers and even sometimes colos inside of the data centers that we build, again, for additional separation. And we're running not only, of course, Azure, but we're running our first-party workloads there as well. Now, we've also operate one of the most robust and reliable networks in the world, and we have over 4,500 points of presence, in addition to 130 edge sites. Now, we haven't stopped there. Running a global cloud requires high-quality network access that can bring you closer to your customers, your partners, and your employees. And we run one of the largest networks in the world, both terrestrial and over the sea. In fact, last week, we actually finished the new Maria subsea cable in conjunction with Facebook and Telxius. Now, it's the first transatlantic cable that goes between Virginia to Spain. We actually wanted to make it a little bit further south so we get a little bit of diversity on the geologic paths that we have. Now, just a couple of things about this thing. It's really cool. It's over 4,000 miles long. That's twice the length of the Rio Grande River. It's over 10 million pounds of cable, or the equivalent of 34 blue whales. I don't know how you measure a whale, but that's a lot of pounds. So it's not just the longest, but it's also the fastest. You can send 160 terabytes per second of data through there. That's 16 million times faster than the average home internet connection. So I would love to get one for my house, but I don't think I can spring the $1 billion. But you can use this if you pair up the regions. Now, we continue to make more improvements like this. I think it's ever increasingly more important. You have transatlantic, trans-Pacific, and essentially everywhere around the world that we have presence, again, getting you closer to your customers, your partners, as well as your employees. So expect us to continue to do more work like that. Now, we also have continued to expand ExpressRoute. And ExpressRoute gives you an enterprise way to be able to connect your data centers to my data centers. And that's super important when we think about our hybrid scenarios that we want to enable. Now, we've continued to grow ExpressRoute. In fact, we have over 100 partners worldwide that are available now. And highly probable that if you look through the list of partners that we have in here, you're probably already covered, even in the global, worldwide places that you are. We continue to add more providers, and of course, as we add more regions, for example, we announced South Africa, we've been live in Korea for a while, we announced France, there's other sorts of locations around the world. You can expect us to continue to go out there and find even more providers to continue to get you connected. Now, there's nothing more critical than keeping your site accessible if you have customer-facing properties that need to be out there. And increasingly, we've seen an escalation in the attacks on website availability. And in fact, earlier this year, you probably had noticed that some of these IoT cameras had gotten hacked. And once they got owned, they started actually executing massive attacks on the public cloud. So to combat this, I'm very pleased to announce the preview of Azure DDoS protection. Now, we offer 24/7 protection, from over 60 different types of network attacks that can come through. And basically what we're doing is we're providing an always-on network flow monitoring. And the way you should think about this is we're basically going in with machine learning algorithms. We're figuring out when these abnormal patterns take place and essentially how they evolve as well, and then taking that learning and then applying it to do smart routing on traffic and figuring out what we can actually go get rid of to shed some of that load. And of course, we have that huge capacity that helps as well. Now, we're actually building this on top of DDoS support that we've been building for years internally. We protect Xbox Live, we protect Office 365. In fact, every year when we get down to the December holiday period, I have my one DDoS team goes on alert, and we basically monitor the network because we want to make sure that if somebody gets a new Xbox right there and that holiday is a gift, that they can turn it on, sign on to Xbox Live, and they're good to go. Now, you didn't notice that we actually had one of the biggest attack actually against Xbox Live that happened during that last holiday period. We weren't in the news, and to me, that's a good thing because I'm an infrastructure provider. We weren't in the news for that. We were in the news for how good the Xbox team did. But that's again because this is the same technology that we've used in order to be able to handle that, and we're now bringing it out as the Azure DDoS protection service. Now, I want to move into compute because now we have our data centers and regions around the world. We've got our networking connecting things together. I got protection on my applications and where those are coming from. And we need to start getting down into the workload. So how are we going to go run these? Now we have a very extensive set of compute options for all types of applications. So entry level and burstable and optimized for memory and storage and compute. Our HPC solutions also include InfiniBand. We've got fast networking on the backplane. That's basically designed so you can run those really demanding workloads. Let's go ahead and take a look at a few of these examples of new things we've got. I want to start off with the B series, which is in preview right now. And this is really great for web servers and small database dev and test, running Haswell E5s. It's basically going to be a low-cost, flexible set of CPUs. So you can get up to 8 vCPUs, 32 gigs of RAM. Good solution for that kind of lower-end workload. Then we move off into general purpose, and this is where I need a good blend between memory and RAM and the chip. We're running Haswell E5s on this one. This is where we introduce hyperthreading, so we have support for nested virtualization, Hyper-V containers. You saw Corey actually demonstrate some of that this morning, so I can get up to 64 vCPUs and 256 gig of RAM. Now we move into compute intensive, and this one is cool. We're getting into Skylake here. What I really find with this one is HPC scenarios, scientific modeling, cluster computing, and gaming is another good one as well. Because if you think about a gaming backend, especially mobile gaming, tons and tons of phones, multiplayer, that kind of stuff. What I'm really looking for is some really fast CPU processing, and I want something that can crank through that very, very quickly. So we've got some really great solutions for that, and that one is coming out here in the year 2017. That's a quarterly for a year view, so it's coming out very quick. Now switch over and start looking at some of the other optimizations. Memory optimize is the next one, and here we're looking at our new EV3s. In particular for memory, we start looking at things that really want to have a lot of RAM, and of course we have a good scale here. So these are running Broadwell chips. They're hyper-threaded again, 64 vCPUs and 432 gigabytes of RAM. Which is a good size. I can allocate a lot of those. And then we showed off the M series both this morning and before. And this is the machine that gets us up to that much even higher one. This, again, is a perfect one if I'm going to run big and memory-intensive workloads. I think HANA in production is the one we showed before, but of course, great for SQL Server, great for all sorts of options that you have as well. Now, graphics intensive. This gets to be super interesting because we are innovating with NVIDIA and pulling out the latest and greatest chips. So we've got the NVIDIA P100 GPU that's here. We've got the fast networking, and this one's great for HPC scenarios that I want to be able to run. That's followed up by the ND, and this is the P40 GPU. Also very fast, and this one designed specifically around machine learning and advanced AI. And in fact, what you'll find, or we've found, is that there's about a 21x inference throughput against the K80s out there today. And that's really important because if I'm going to be doing AI, I've got a whole training regimen that I go through, and then I want to run inference. So those examples you saw, here's a picture, what is it? Here's a picture, what is it? That's the inference loop that's running, and the P40s are awesome for this. Now, this we needed it for ourselves as well because our folks inside of Microsoft think about Skype real-time translation, the training that we do for the HPU, the holographic processing unit on the HoloLens. All of those things are trained on top of the Azure fleet. And we had a huge demand internally as well for the latest and greatest NVIDIA chips. And so we're bringing these out. And Microsoft Azure is the only cloud that will give you access to both the P40s and B100s at the same time. And we've got an aggressive roadmap coming up ahead, so if you've got other needs for GPUs, you can expect us to be out there in that first-to-market position. Now let's move over to storage. Object store is something that is critical to storing your data in all sorts of application types that we have. And what we've tried to do is provide a wide variety of use cases here. Now, first of all, from a scale perspective, Azure storage is pretty awesome. We've got over 130 trillion objects with a T in the system, and it continues to grow. And we will execute about 30 million transactions per second that users are using to go grab that data, read it, write it, and do whatever they need. Now, of course, we want to have a good spectrum here from hot data, where I want to be able to pick the data up very quickly and use it pretty much immediately, getting into cool data, where I don't necessarily need it immediately. In fact, the price point would be good if you can make it a little bit more distant, but not so much that I have to wait for a long period of time. And then most recently, we've introduced in preview Azure Archive. And this is especially important for rarely used data. And that's a good case, for example, if I'm doing backups that are there for compliance. That would be a great use case. That's a case where, frankly, I'm probably going to write it in there and not even worry about it, except I have compliance requirements. And so if I have an audit request or something else that I have to meet, I am going to have to retrieve it and go do the work. But otherwise, I'm kind of okay, out of sight, out of mind, no big deal. But I need to make sure that it stays robust, and it's got to be stored in the long haul. Now, how do I get that data into the system? I'm very pleased today to announce in preview a new solution we have called Azure Data Box. And we've actually been running Azure import and export functionality for several years now. It allows you to ship disks from your data center to mine and vice versa. So we've had that support for a while, but we continue to hear asks for even more storage support. And DataBox is designed specifically for this. We allow you to now have 100 terabytes with bulk transport per device, and of course you can have multiple devices. We're running secure AES 256 encryption for that, so you can keep your data secure. And what I would also say is that this also comes with a secure chain of custody on your media, just like we implemented already for the import-export feature we've had for a while, because it's super important that you know exactly where your data is when it leaves your data center until it gets to mine, until you can see it in your subscription. Now we've built this all in so that it integrates very seamlessly with a lot of different solutions. So Commvault, NetApp, Veritas, Veeam, and others. So it makes it super easy for you to be able to leverage this. Now I see really great scenarios. Some of them are kind of bulk ingest, like maybe you've had backups on premises for a long time and you'd like to move them. That's a great scenario. The other one I think is really interesting is disconnected scenarios. You saw the mines that were there in the Rio Tinto example. Well, those mines are oftentimes, far out, and they don't necessarily have good linkages. Oil fields, oil and gas, et cetera, very similar kind of problem. And so what we're seeing is a lot of use cases for wanting to have even a set of Azure Data Box appliances there, so you can actually kind of round robin through those. And that absolutely is a supported scenario that I think is going to work really well. Then I don't have to worry about some of the bandwidth and ingress-egress issues that I have. So that's something new. And Azure Data Box, we actually have Azure Data Box, the appliances, they're actually here at the event. So if you go over to the Microsoft area at the show, you'll have an opportunity to talk to the team and go see it in person. Now I'm also pleased to announce Azure File Sync, and this is a new piece of functionality we've introduced, and it's about hybrid storage options. Here in particular, what we're trying to do is to make it super simple to expand your on-premises file servers into Azure, providing cloud benefits and maintaining your performance and your compatibility. Several different things to think about this one. So first of all, multi-site access. What this does is it provides the same write access for data in Windows Server and also then in Azure files. So that means you can keep your data synchronized between your on-premises solutions and the cloud automatically. It also has cloud tiering, and cloud tiering allows me to say, look, I want to store a certain amount of data locally, but that's usually where I run out of SAN space, or take your pick, whatever your local storage is, and that stuff's expensive. So if I can do cloud tiering, then I can put a higher percentage of storage in the public cloud, and we'll automatically manage that for you. It integrates very well with Azure Backup, and that means that you don't have to do a lot of the extra configuration work in order to make sure that you're backed up. And we also have Rapid DR, so you can restore your file metadata immediately and recall it when it's needed. So Azure File Sync, really the goal here is to help IT pros, so you can kind of move past some of the keeping the lights on activity and get the software to do some of that heavy lifting, so we can move on to the next thing that we have on our backlog. Now, I'm sure that many of you, as I talk to you, are telling me that, hey, I'm using NetApp appliances as well today. I'm using ONTAP in my own data centers. And earlier this summer, we announced a partnership with NetApp. And today I'm excited to share more details on what we're building for you. So together we're making it even easier for our customers to transform their existing applications to the cloud. So we're going to do NFS via NetApp ONTAP. It'll be available as a native Azure service powered by NetApp bare metal hardware and software. So that basically means beyond just kind of like a virtualized, kind of gateway solution, we're talking about the actual appliances that you're probably running in your own data centers today. But the cool thing is when they're running in my data center, you're going to be able to manage ONTAP with Azure exactly like you do any of the other Azure services. I can go right into the Azure portal and I can do my configuration and get things set up, and we'll help make sure between us and NetApp that you get that native performance and the security and everything else you need. So once again, looking at what are the workloads that you would like to have flexibility on for where you run on premises and in the cloud, and how can we partner with a key partner like NetApp in order to make sure that that works really well. Now you can register at netapp.com/Azure. That one's a hard one to say. netapp.com/Azure, or you can visit the NetApp booth to learn more about that. So if you're using NetApp today and it's already part of your solution, highly encourage you to go check this solution out. All right, so I've got my data centers, my compute, my networking, I've got storage, so that's awesome. Now I have workloads that I need to go get up and running. And so here, we've provided the most comprehensive resiliency and best SLA because HA and DR are going to be super important for us. First of all, we start off with the industry's only single instance VM SLA. In fact, Amazon doesn't have one. But we will actually have a money-backed SLA for a single instance VM that you can get at a 99.9. Moving into higher availability, we add things like availability sets. And availability sets, definitely you need to be using those in production. Availability sets and managed disks. And what this does is it sets me up so that I have my virtual machines, and they're going to be deployed automatically. There's not work for you to do, but they'll automatically be deployed across a diverse set of hardware. So that way, even if we have some kind of a breaker, you have a power issue, you have a node that fails, you want to be able to automatically have that workload continue to run. And that's what availability sets help you do. Now, we've also introduced availability zones. The way you should think about zones is more like a metro kind of complex. I can think of my multiple data centers, but they're within a speed of light bubble that can give me about a 2 millisecond synchronous write latency. In other words, we want to make sure that we're doing the replication. Anything over 2 milliseconds starts to get a bit long. That's for the whole stack. And so this gives you basically a metro kind of solution for that. And it's really easy to use because as you're deploying your virtual machines, you just say which zone you want it in. And you can do it in multiple zones, and you can set up your traffic across those. And that's going to give you an awesome solution to be able to manage that. Now, here's the thing. The other cloud providers stop there, and they just quit. And so the only issue with that is we still haven't talked about disaster recovery. So zones are great for the case where even, let's say we have a colo that literally catches on fire. I mean, firewall, that name came from someplace, right? So if you literally catch it on fire and burn the thing down, the colo's gone. Well, if that's a zone, you got another zone next door. And that's usually an isolated kind of failure, so it's going to keep working. So I can get high availability and I don't have to suffer any downtime. But what happens if a tornado comes flying through the eastern part of the United States and wipes out the metro and your zones are gone? And so if you are using other cloud providers and your DR strategy is sitting just in zones, you should ask yourself real quick, is my data actually safe, from all events that are there? Not just, hardware failures and failover, but you need to have something safer than that. So the key thing that we've done here is we've always had, since the start in Azure, our region pair concept. And we basically spread out region pairs across hundreds of kilometers between them, again, to protect against these natural disaster scenarios that can occur. And we have things like GRS that allow you to replicate the data and keep it in sync. And what that allows is even if that tornado wipes out another provider on the East Coast and they're just done, well, if you've got GRS turned on and you're using region pairs, then you can fail over to another region and you can keep up continuity for your company. So we believe that this is the most comprehensive with the best set of SLAs that are here. I've shown you the money-backed SLAs that are here, but there's also third parties that will show what the observable SLAs are, and those are closer into your 5 nines range, and that's frankly the target I set for my team. Is like, I don't know what the SLA says from a contractual basis, but we're shooting for the 5 nines and then plus in some of the very redundant systems that we have. So comprehensive solutions there, definitely check those out. Now, our next thing we need to go look at is to go take a look at security as well as on management. And that one is super important because as we think about this, there's a set of things that we need to be able to do. In particular, there's common tasks like secure, protect, monitor, configure, and govern. Those are super important for us. Now, today, we're happy to announce 2 additional features that we've got as well. And those features are Azure Policy and Azure Security Center Adaptive Application Controls. It's a mouthful, but it does some cool stuff. So let's talk about Azure Policy first. Now, I will tell you a story. When we moved, and Andrew was gracious to share the Accenture experience, we've been doing the same thing inside of Microsoft with Microsoft IT. And what we found is as we moved more and more of our workloads into the cloud, the great thing was that our developers started getting very productive and they have an opportunity to create a lot of stuff. Now, the only downside to that is they got very productive and they created a lot of stuff. It didn't certainly have policy attached to it. And so then we had a little bit of like, how do we manage this? And so Azure Policy came out of that direct experience. Basically, what Azure Policy does for us is it helps you establish and enforce standards to continually monitor compliance of your environment. Now, what does that mean? It means that as an IT pro, I can specify the kind of rules or conditions that I need in my running of my subscription. For example, I can set rules like no public IPs. High availability features must be turned on in production so I don't have an outage. Security settings have to be enforced. When I set up these environments and that policy, then it can apply to the subscription, and I can still let the dev team go off and be agile and productive. But I know that when they're creating instances and applications and they're running in DevOps and between us we're doing the deploys, that they're not going to get out there with something that is going to have some problems, because it's kind of our job to make sure things are secure and they're reliable and they're robust. So Azure Policy is designed to help you do that. Now, the adaptive application controls is another interesting set of technologies. There's a couple things in here that I would call out. One of those is JIT access. It stands for just-in-time access. This one's really cool. So, for example, rather than leaving your RDP port open on a virtual machine so that you can basically RDP in and do some admin work, JIT access says, no, that port is shut down. When you need to get in, you can leverage JIT access to open the port and say who gets it and for how long. Usually there's a time out there. For the next half an hour, you'll have access to that RDP port for your virtual machine. And then it's going to expire. And I'm going to be watching who's actually using it. We actually use a very similar technique in order to run our own software internally, because we think it's super important that you don't just have things open for port scans and people just kind of streaming through there. So that's built in. The other one that's cool is adaptive whitelisting. What this does is it looks at a virtual machine. This is part of Security Center. It looks at the applications that are running in that virtual machine, and then it figures out what components are part of that application. Then it uses machine learning to figure out what is the appropriate state for that environment, that virtual machine, those applications and the components that are part of it. And I can now set that is the expected state for that application. From now on, if I wind up seeing any kind of difference from that, I'm going to fire an alert. Now, why is that important? It's super important because that's the sort of thing that can detect malware starting to creep into your system. It can also detect unwanted components. Maybe it wasn't exactly malware, but it was something else. New dependencies started to creep in. Could have caused you some reliability or availability issues. You want to know about that. So those are a couple of really cool features built in for security and management, and those are also out in preview right now. Now, migrate is also another interesting, because we saw, for example, examples of being able to take applications and figuring out where we are. Do I want to move them? How do I move them? How does that work? If you think about migration, deep environment visibility is super important, as is the cost implications and what SLAs am I going to hit. So very pleased to announce Azure Migrate in preview as well. This is a tool that maps out your dependencies and guides you on configuration changes that you may need to make. It enables rapid replication of the data because, for example, I don't really want downtime, so I want to make sure that if I'm creating a new environment, I can fail over. Testing in an isolated environment is also important. Again, I don't want to hit production. It also integrates very well with the database migration services that you saw demoed today in Scott's session, where it made it super easy. So if you've got, for example, a Windows SQL Server .NET application, and you're looking for the opportunity to be able to figure out, can I run that in the cloud, then Azure Migrate and the database migration service is an awesome way to be able to pull that forward. So let's go take a look at the migration support in person. I want to introduce Michael Leeworthy from the Azure team to show it off. Here's Michael.
Awesome. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks very much, Jason. One of the problems that many of our customers face when migrating is simply, what do I have? Will it migrate? Will it work in the cloud? And how much will it cost? And I want to show you some tools today that we've built to help you with these exact things. Now, what you can see up on the screen is a typical VMware environment with the customers running hundreds, if not thousands, of virtual machines, and they now want to migrate them into Azure. So let's look at how they do this. So our new technology, Azure Migrate, enables them to do this a lot easier. You can see here I've actually gone and discovered 215 virtual machines within that vSphere environment using a virtual appliance. And I've now started to create groups. And groups are essentially sets of virtual machines or workloads or applications for me to migrate into Azure. Now, I could do this manually if I know my infrastructure really well, but we've inbuilt dependency mapping straight into the product. So you can actually go out, deploy dependency mapping as part of this, and bring this richness in, both server dependency mapping, but what is super exciting is application dependency mapping to ensure that I'm capturing every server, every workload, every application my applications may be talking to. Now, once I've got this rich data, I want to be able to do things with it. I want to be able to understand my environment even more. And now we have assessments that you basically whip up in seconds. And they provide me that deep, rich information that I need to migrate. Let's look at the first one. This one is Azure readiness. How ready are these virtual machines to move to Azure? We can see here, I'm doing pretty well, but there's a couple to worry about. One here in this data tier is a boot that's, type that's not supported. So this is a UEFI boot type. But luckily, since this is a data tier, I'm actually going to use Azure Database Migration Service to migrate this into Azure SQL Instance or to Azure SQL. So I don't have to worry about that one. There's a couple other warnings as well. I've got an older OS and a CentOS version, so I have to mitigate those before I migrate. But I'm feeling pretty good about migrating this application into Azure now. Next thing I want to look at is cost details. And this is just not looking at the virtual machine on premises and looking how much this is going to cost in Azure. This is just much more. This is intelligent right-sizing. We're looking at the configuration. We're looking at the utilization. In Azure, you want to run those virtual machines at 90, 95% utilized. So through intelligent right-sizing, we can look at the configuration and then make the best determination which Azure series you can run. And in fact, you can double-click down on this, both from compute and storage, and actually determine per virtual machine what that cost analysis is going to be. So this is a fantastic tool that we're releasing today into limited preview that you can actually go out and try for yourself. But now I've got that blueprint of migration, I want to actually go and migrate. And so I'm going to show you an indication on the steps you would take to migrate your environment utilizing Azure Site Recovery. Now, because of the time that it takes to do this, I've built a representation of this to show you all these steps. And they're all pretty simple. First, I'm going to replicate that application or those set of virtual machines in Azure, which I've already done. But I now want to go test that. I don't want to test it in a production. I want to do that in an isolated environment. So essentially, through a recovery plan, which is a script of bringing the virtual machines up in the right order, I'm going to do a test failover. In this case, it's going to build an isolated environment for me in my Azure infrastructure to go and test that application. And after a while, that's going to take place. I can see it was successfully deployed, and now I can go and test that application to make sure it's performing exactly the way that I want it to. And now I'm ready to migrate that to Azure. How do I do that? Well, simply, since those machines are already replicated and they're already sitting in Azure, and I know they're consistent with a synchronous replication, I can simply just choose the virtual machines that I want and hit the complete migration button. And what this does is it migrates those or pushes those into production for me, and it'll even go and turn off those virtual machines on premises. So now I have a great tool for discovery and assessment, and also a great tool for replication. But again, migration just doesn't stop there. Once I'm in Azure, I want to be able to continue to do cost optimization and analysis. So how do we do this? With Azure Cost Management provided by Cloud-In, I can now do this easily. And I'm showing you some capabilities here within our Cloud-In UI that will be inbuilt into Azure costing later this afternoon, so you can experience it as part of that environment. Now, this can do wonderful things, but there are two great reports that are excellent for migration once I've moved those virtual machines into Azure. And they are the VM efficiency and the right-sizing report. Let's go pick on the VM efficiency one. This one will showcase a very graphical way to ensure that I'm utilizing those virtual machines as much as possible. Remember, in migration, I want to drive 90, 95% utilization of my virtual machines, so I'm using the best costing structure. Now, you can see here, I've got a lot of virtual machines that are being underutilized, so I want to be able to go and fix that. I want to be able to go and answer that. And in fact, the Cloud-In capability enables me to do inbuilt sizing opportunities. So as we showed intelligent right-sizing in Azure Migration, this is continual optimization, continual right-sizing as part of my environment. So you can see here it's saying, all right, there are potential savings to be made. And in fact, if I look at this, you'll see that it's saying, hey, you've got a couple of A1 resources that if we rejigger these, we can actually save you money and even provide you a list of candidates to be able to do that. So since this is a fairly instant change for me, I can go in and re-architect, change the series type, and make instant savings. So what we showed you this morning or this afternoon is Azure Migrate, doing dependency mapping, discovery, assessment, and costing, simple replication with Azure Site Recovery, and then ongoing cost optimization with Cloud-In. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. And I think one of the other lessons that we had learned, again, from doing our own IT work exactly like this, is that we were able to actually reduce our overall spend quite a bit by doing the kind of dynamic piece, like allocating virtual machines, shutting them down when we didn't need it. But actually right-sizing was also saved us another $11 million on our budget. We had cases where we had over-allocated virtual machines. So tools like this, I think, come in very handy for that. I want to wrap up on the infrastructure side and talk a little bit about data center futures, because we're not done yet. There's obviously a whole bunch of innovation, but there's even more that's coming. I want to share a couple of exciting ones that we have. Confidential computing, I think, is going to be a very impactful one. This is something that we have worked on with Intel. And what this basically does is it starts to build in additional security into the hardware itself. That means you can see here in an enclave, that's the only place where that code and that data are actually able to run where they're not encrypted. What does that mean? That means that unobservable and tamper-proof guarantees come with this. That means even if, for example, the host operating system were to get compromised in some way, well, it's okay because the host OS doesn't get raw access to the data anyway in this kind of a solution. Now that means your customer workloads, they're invisible to the host fabric, to the host OS, and that means that your data is always encrypted, and the only place it comes out is exactly where your code and your data live together. So we think this is going to be a really great innovation in the future that will allow for even more highly secure computing needs. We're also spending a lot of time on energy. It's a combination of green energy and more efficiency that we can use. Because we're at a point where the public cloud, if you're just consuming gigawatts of power, we really do want to go figure this out. One of the next generation energy technologies we're working on is fuel cells. You can see a prototype example here, a 20-rack system, which is right there with our team, right there in the background. And above that is a set of fuel cells. They're right next door to where the power is required, which means we don't have to worry about transmission over long distances to get that power where they're needed. And of course, we still wire in all the normal redundancy and the work that we expect to have in there. So these are just a couple of examples of some of the database futures that we've got, or the data center futures. Lots of new innovation coming. I would highly recommend it if you're interested in these kind of future-looking topics to attend Mark Rustinovich's talk. Mark's my CTO for Azure, and he's got a whole talk dedicated to the futures, all the way out to femto lasers and disk storage and DNA and a whole bunch of other really cool stuff that you saw from before. Builds on top of some of the quantum stuff and the cryo work that Satya talked about this morning. So lots of cool stuff to have. Now that wraps us up on the infrastructure side, and I want to then transition into talking about modernizing applications. In particular, let's take a look at what's needed, because if you think about modernizing apps, apps are this fuel for this digital transformation that we have. And we're in a world where you're not going to see a new hire eventually that has, they've lived their entire life with something with a touchscreen in their pocket. So what does that world look like? And sometimes I'm able to create brand new apps, but that's not actually all that realistic all the time. I'd like to get another customer view on this. And ASOS is a leading fashion retailer with 12 million active customers around the world. And in fact, you saw some coverage of ASOS this morning around the way in which they handled database and their data technology. We're in an infrastructure talk here, so I actually want to spend some time talking about, well, what are the infrastructure needs for a similar kind of customer requirement? So let's go ahead and roll the video.
ASOS wants to be the #1 fashion destination for 20-somethings around the world. We have just over 12 million active customers, and we have 80,000 products on the site at any one point in time across over 800 brands. We want to be there for our customers 24/7, 365 days of the year. Over the last couple of years, we've embarked on quite a significant program of essentially rewriting our entire digital platform. And the reason we did that was scale, to change quickly and innovate for our customers, and to give a globally consistent service. Our legacy platform was all hosted in one data center in the UK. It wasn't designed with mobile first in mind. Azure has been brilliant. And for me, the proof in that was our first Black Friday on the full new platform in Azure. We had 167 million visits. We had our biggest hour, our biggest second and biggest financial day as well. And we had literally no problems throughout the entire weekend. So that was a huge and a very important success for us. In terms of the future, our new digital platform on Azure is really just the beginning. We have so many more things we want to develop now. We want to start innovating in new ways through visual search, through voice search, through different forms of interaction. All of that will get developed within Azure.
So That's a really fantastic example of some of the scale. Now, I'd love to spend some time. Let's drill into this a little bit more again from an infrastructure side. Please help me in welcoming Bob Strudwick, the CTO of ASOS, to the stage. Bob. Bob, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. So as we saw in the video, you guys have been going through a big transformation there. So what started all this for you?
Well, I guess the story started 4 years ago with the decision to replace everything. The software stack on which we'd built the business had reached the end of its natural life. It was increasingly difficult to scale, increasingly difficult to modify. What we needed, I guess, was sort of in three parts really. From a sort of customer perspective, we needed an architecture that delivered a globally consistent, high performance and availability. We needed the flexibility to take new features to market, and we needed to be able to innovate in the way that those features were presented to our early adopter, 20-somethings. Further back from that consumer domain, in the business system domain of back-end systems of finance and buying and merchandising and so on, we primarily needed stability and scalability. And then underpinning the whole thing, we needed the big data platform to sort of handle the volume and variety of data from those disparate systems and the data science to sort of derive new insight from it.
Well, that's a heck of a lot of change. So let me guess, you shut the business down, deleted everything and started from scratch, right? Okay, we don't get to do that. So how did you handle, like, I've got a business, the business is growing, but yet I need to do that transformation you just talked about. How did you go about doing that?
Well, we started with the consumer domain. That was the area of the software stack that was under most pressure, and it was also the area through which we could derive most business benefit, most competitive advantage. So if you look at our architecture right now from a sort of 10,000 foot, you'll see the new software coexisting through a service tier with legacy backend systems, and we're looking to, so we have Express Route, you mentioned it earlier on. Yep. I expect you pronounced it wrong, it's Express Route.
Express Route, okay, sorry. I'll put that on my schedule to figure out later, okay.
So we have Express Route because we have old and new coexisting. During the course of this year, we'll replace those backend systems. We've got Dynamics 360, 365. We have Oracle Retail running on IaaS, and we'll replace those backend systems at the as the second half of that transformation.
Sure, but no big bangs though. It's a combination of rolling it in and making it go, which makes sense. And so, as we saw in the video, you had a very impressive Black Friday. Yeah. And I know that's the peak of the retail year. Yeah. So, what was it like behind the scenes on that one? Because that could be pretty, kind of white knuckle time sometimes.
Well, other than if you live and breathe a transformation like this, it's sort of difficult on a day like Black Friday to really accept that it's going to go okay. But in the event, it was a bit of a non-event. That service tier had gone into production in early 2016, and during the course of the year, we'd incrementally pointed our Android, iOS, and web applications at the new services, and so by Black Friday we were done. We'd had a dry run with the Halloween sale, and it was all in the preparation, and we had a lot of support from the Azure teams getting there. But on the day, we did okay. We took 500,000 sales, peaked at 33 orders. We took 500,000 orders. We peaked at 33 orders a second. Our services were running up to sort of 3,000 requests a second. We had 48 millisecond average response times. We were pretty pleased, I can tell you that.
That's pretty awesome, and congratulations on that fantastic day. So as CTO, you're planning out the future here as well. So can you give us a little idea, especially for folks that are thinking of a similar kind of transformation, where are you headed next?
Well, I guess, it's sort of worth saying that, with, we took two big decisions early in this process. One was to go microservice, and two was to go Azure Platform as a Service. And we took those two decisions primarily. The microservice part of the equation is about delivering a flexibility and scalability. So the services that underpin an e-commerce journey, of product, bag, checkout, service. These are independently deployable units of code, and when you do deploy them, you give those services the system resources it needs to handle its part of the overall load. And the platform as a service decision has helped us really to focus on delivering sort of design and build of capability, and to move away from the sort of commodity compute stuff of sort of server upgrades and patches and database backups and the things that don't per se bring competitive advantage. So building on that platform, and that's what went into production before Black Friday. Then the next phase for us is probably in two parts: the big data side, using more of that big data to drive a more compelling consumer experience, and we're heavily invested in the idea of exploiting some of the next gen compute options that are coming out. So we're already building services using Service Fabric, and seeing a software engineer productivity improvements and better service density. And we think that containers is a big part of our future architecture. We like the increased isolation of that model. We like the better security. We like the faster deploy time. It fits with the investment that we've made in our DevOps culture. So we're really pleased to see Docker being supported in Service Fabric, and we're interested in how it's going to play out with some of those sort of independent capabilities, Azure Container Services, and so on. But
awesome.
Listen, there's loads you could go on all day.
Very ambitious, fantastic. Hey, thank you, Bob. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you for the partnership.
All right.
Thanks, Bob.
Cheers. Thanks.
So the pattern that Bob described there, I think, is actually a good one that we've used even ourselves. I can start off with an existing application and figure out how to leverage containers to get a version of that image that, frankly, I can use for both developer and for operations. We can get the same page. Once I get that, I can start introducing more modern DevOps. So, continuous integration, continuous deployment for my changes going through with health models. And then once I get this up and running, I can also then start enabling the optionality for hybrid. So things I can run on-premises, things that I can run in the public cloud, and then finally refactoring into a modern microservices architecture as well. And to be clear, you don't have to necessarily do all of these, but it is a really interesting pattern. And the key thing here is I don't really suffer the downtime. I need to keep my business running even as I am actually transforming how I'm working. So I'm very pleased to announce today Windows Server version 1709. This is the first semi-annual channel release that we've got coming up. There's a lot of innovation in here for applications, especially around containers. Now, this one supports running native Linux tools in the Windows subsystem I have. We've got support for both Windows as well as Linux containers on top of Hyper-V. Again, I get better security, the thing that Bob mentioned there, when I don't have shared kernel mode. So I have all of those options available to me. There's also a server management as reimagined here with Project Honolulu. So a lot of really great innovation coming through. So definitely go pick up 1709 and take a look at the new functionality we have coming in. And we're going to do a demo here coming up in just a minute. Now, we also have the broadest support for containers here in Azure. You can start off with App Service if I want to build things for like mobile backends or web backends. Service Fabric, which Bob mentioned, I actually build a significant portion of Azure on top of Service Fabric itself, and we have a lot of our customers that leverage it too. We're going to talk about that one in just a second. Azure Container Service gives me the ability to actually leverage container orchestrators, open source, Docker Swarm, Mesosphere, and Kubernetes as different options. And we most recently introduced Azure Container Instance, or ACI. This allows you with a single command line to go deploy a container instance just like that. I don't have to set up orchestrators. I don't do any of that work. I just deploy it as though it were a virtual machine, but I'm now having per second billing, which is pretty awesome. Now, we also support third-party ecosystem as well. So good examples, Pivotal and Cloud Foundry, and the thing we announced most recently with Red Hat with support for OpenShift and increased support actually from a customer support side from both companies. And that builds on the work we had done with RHEL and the OS work that Red Hat had. Now, once you've got this technology in place, you need a place to contain, deal with your registry. And so we have Azure Container Registry, or you can use Docker Hub. You can take your choice. This is for managing those images. And of course, we have a broad spectrum of developer tools and clients available to you. So I'm also happy to announce today, we have a lot of great announcements. A Service Fabric for Linux has now reached general availability. And Service Fabric is a general hosting platform for highly scalable apps. It has container orchestration, but also support built in for microservices, including state. The advanced lifecycle management is really cool. And this is why I use it for Build Azure as well. Because what happens is I can deploy a new build, health models, the state can get evolved to the new build if I need to. Health models kick in and tell me if it was successful. If it's not, I can roll back to the previous version automatically, and the state can roll back too. That's really freaking hard, I can tell you that. But it gives me awesome improved density, I get better scalability, and I've put this thing up against the wall and just shot at it as long as I can, and it's just massively highly available the way that it's architected. So we use it ourselves, we use it under Cortana and Voice, we use it in Skype for Business, we use it in Azure, but the other cool thing is it comes with an SDK, and that means that you can actually leverage it on your on-premises as well as in other clouds if you want. So you don't have to worry about the lock-in piece. In fact, over 40% of the deployments today from customers are actually on-premises deploys. So definitely encourage you to go check that out. Now, let's take a look at containers a little bit more deeply. I want to introduce Aaron Chappell from the Windows Server team, and we're going to go take a look at containers. Here's Aaron.
Good afternoon. We hear a lot about how containers are a critical technology for developers who are building born-in-the-cloud applications. But when I talk to enterprises, they have tens, if not thousands, of existing applications that are critical to their business. Those enterprises want to understand how they can exploit the agility of modern applications and get those applications cloud ready for the time when they decide that they want to move to the cloud. And so today I'm going to talk to you about how using Windows containers you can realize this without touching a line of code or getting your developers involved. So to set up the demo, I'm going to walk through, if we can advance the slide, I'm going to walk through just the process I'm going to use as we go through. So first, I have an existing web application. It's running in a VM, a Windows Server 2012 VM on premises with 4 gigabytes of RAM, 40 gigabytes of storage behind it. I'm going to take that application and I want to modernize it. So the next step I'm going to go through is to actually convert it to a container and do all of the validation on that application. Now the cool thing is that I can do that modernization without touching the existing application. And so it's still running for my users. I'm minimizing risk. And then when I know it's up and running, I can then publish it to the Azure Container Registry, and then from there, either deploy it into the cloud in Azure using Azure Container Instances or on premises. So with that set up, let's take a look at the demo. OK. So first, let me show you the web application that I have. If I just open up Edge here, you'll see this is First Up Consultants. It's their document repository. And it's not a really advanced application, but it's critical to their business because it allows their consultants to download templates that they use in their day-to-day business. So I can go through, I can hover over the docs, I can download it. So let's go look at and show what it takes to actually modernize this application. So I'm going to go in, and the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to run the convert to Docker command. I provide the remote path. I give it the output path that I want it to save the files to, and these are the files it's going to use to go ahead and build the container. I can tell it what type of artifact I'm using, so here IaaS, and I give it a name. So if I go ahead and run that command, it's going to go ahead and it's going to generate the files that I need to build the container. So with that, let's navigate to the directory that I just created. And you can see in there, the Docker file is the important file that you really want to pay attention to. So if I go ahead and I actually open up that file, let's take a look at what's inside. So here you can see the Docker file. It specifies the base image that I'm going to use to build that container. And then it's as simple as a set of PowerShell scripts, commands that walk me through how I actually load that application in and get that application and that website up and running. So that is the Docker file. Once I go ahead and I have that Docker file, then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build it. And it's going to use those instructions in the Docker file to actually build up that container instance. And then once I have it up and running, then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run an instance of that container. So you can see this command returns the ID of the specific container instance that's now up and running. And once that container instance is up and running, then what I can do is I can actually run commands against it using that container ID. So here I'm going to go ahead and run ipconfig against that container. You can see it's up and running. And here I have this IP address. Now, as I mentioned before, I've done all of this without touching my existing application. So if I go back to Edge and I bring up, I have my existing application, my users are still using it, I have no risk that I've incurred in doing this conversion. But as you can see, I've spun up a parallel container that has that application in it, and it's identical to my original application. So as an IT professional, the great thing here is I can get it up and running, I can validate it, I can make sure it's working exactly as I want, and then once that's done, I'm going to go back to PowerShell, and I'm going to publish it to the Azure Container Registry. So here you can go, it's uploading it in. In just a second, I'll go back over into Edge, and I'll go look at my repositories up in the Azure repository instance. I'm going to go ahead and click refresh. You can see my document repo is now up there. And if I click on latest, I can go ahead and I can just run an instance. And all I have to do is specify the information to run it. Now, today we're announcing that in Azure Container Instances, in addition to being able to run Linux instances, you can now run Windows Container Instances. And so as this is a Windows container application, I'm going to go in, and all I have to do is type in container name. I've specified that it's a Windows container instance. I'm going to specify the resource group that I'm going to deploy this into. We'll pick First Up Consultants Ignite. Click OK, and it's just as easy as that. Now I have an instance of that Windows container running in Azure, and I've taken it all the way from my existing app into that modern application. Now, this shows you on the IT side what you need to do in order to really lay that container infrastructure. But once you've done that, what it enables you to do, or it enables the developer to do, is integrate containers into their natural workflow. So I'm not going to demo a ton in here. Scott talked a lot about how we've added support for being able to add in Docker support into an existing project. But the thing from an IT point of view that's really important here is what this does, that it enables the developer to author in a container environment, which is exactly the way in which it's going to be deployed in production. So that minimizes all the risk that you have of moving things from your dev environment into production and just make things safer. So with that, I've showed you how easy it is to modernize your existing application and take it and get it running into Azure or deployed on premises. The one last thing I'd like to show you before I go is that the real value prop, right, of what I've shown you is that you're using a common infrastructure and a common set of processes, irrespective of the application type that you're deploying. And so I'm really excited by the work that my team has done to expand this beyond applications to the operating system layer. And so here, I'm excited to announce with the 1709 version of Windows Server, you can now run the full Linux kernel in a Windows container. I'm going to say that again. You can run the full Linux kernel in a Windows container. And so here I'm actually running the Alpine version of Linux, which is very popular with developers. And just to prove to you that it works, I'm going to show you the contents of what I'm doing. Oh, wait a second. Sorry, you'll have to excuse my Windows DNA here. I'll go ahead and LS there, and you can see, again, I'm running Windows combined seamlessly with Linux in order to provide that consistent. What about that for maximum developer agility and choice? So I hope you'll use the Windows Server 1709 version and check this out. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Aaron. Now, if we think currently about hybrid, we also want to make sure that we look at really kind of product truth in hybrid. And we've really tried to build that into the core, starting off with a common identity, data platform, unified development, and security and management. Things are designed so that we can actually allow you to run things on premises as well as in the public cloud and have that full flexibility. And a great example of that is Azure Stack. I really like Azure Stack. A year ago, if you were at this session, we showed off some of the new appliances that we were building here on stage. And I'm happy, and Scott announced this morning, that we've gone to general availability, and you can actually order those devices now. I think it's awesome for especially disconnected scenarios, places where I don't actually have control, but I can also, or I don't have networking, I want to run factory floor, I want to run on a ship, it's a remote kind of thing. It's also great for regulatory environments where I really need to have control over doing public dev tests in the cloud, but also deploy into a controlled environment. So we saw a lot of fantastic usage for Azure Stack, and we have the devices out on the floor as well. So definitely go and take a look at that. Now this morning, Natalia actually demonstrated Azure Stack in Scott's session, and she basically showed off how to actually go use the application and take care of it on the top end side. But in our audience, a lot of what we're doing is we're responsible for creating that environment in the first place and making sure that it's secure as we manage it as well. And so I want to invite Natalia back up to further the demo that she did in the previous session, but now take a look at the admin point of view on how we would actually secure the environment and create it. So let me introduce Natalia.
Thanks, Jason. Good afternoon. As Jason mentioned, I demonstrated the edge and disconnected scenario this morning in Scott Guthrie's session. And that really was about having global Azure being used for a fleet-wide application and then running Azure Stack locally on a ship to do operations. So real-time operations. So let's pick up where we left off. Here is the actual application that's running on an Azure Stack environment on a ship. As we go to the Azure Stack portal, again, it looks just like the Azure portal. One of the key things for this audience to do is manage and operate in Azure Stack. You're probably thinking, who's managing and operating this Azure Stack for me? You have the opportunity to either manage and operate in Azure Stack yourself or have an SI or service provider manage it for you. So I'm going to drill down in the management and operations experience on Azure Stack, everything from managing applications as well as managing the Azure Stack. So here in the Azure Stack portal, one of the things you may want to do is look at who has access to your resources. So Azure Stack has role-based access control where you can add users to manage your applications. In this case, I'm going to add Jason as an owner to actually manage the resources for this application on Azure Stack. So now, with that simple click, Jason has the control to manage the applications and resources. Another key function for an Azure Stack operator is the operations and management of Azure Stack. We've actually created an Azure Stack operator experience. And we're also introducing an Azure Stack operator certification. Within the Azure Stack's operations, you can see this is the portal for administration. You have the capability to understand your resources, as well as see if there's any critical alerts. But one of the most important tasks an operator has is to keep Azure Stack updated with updates for security and new feature capabilities. Here you can see in our Azure Stack environment, we have an update that's available. We've implemented orchestrated patch and update technologies on Azure Stack. So you can choose when to deploy an update. We'll be providing updates on a cloud cadence, but actually updating the Azure Stack system is as simple as just clicking the Update Now button. This gives you the simplicity and ease of management for the operator, so you can focus on business innovation and hybrid application development. We're really excited about delivering Azure Stack and having it in market. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Natalia. So we've finished up our top-level tour going through core and infrastructure into modern applications and hybrid environments. And what I want to tell you is that we're here to help because there's more and more technology coming out. And just when you think you're figuring out containers and then blockchain and whatever the heck, Satya's on stage with future Nobel Prize winning PhDs, which is pretty cool. But the key thing for you is that you've learned a set of skills in the Microsoft ecosystem, PowerShell, programming languages, and our server environments. And as we get new and new innovations along, we want to bring you along and be your partner so you can exploit and adopt some of the cool new stuff that comes from that. Now, how do we get started? A couple of things. First, we have Azure free accounts we've announced today. That allows you to experiment, learn, and build for free. $200 credit and 12 months of popular services, and you can start today by going to azure.com, whack free. In addition to this, we've introduced a new program that we're bootstrapping. It's called Fast Track for Azure. And this is actually bootstrapped from my engineering team. You're going to get direct access to Azure engineers. And what we want to do is work closely with you so we can get you hands-on training, help you get your subscriptions going, get your first workload up and running. That's what we're here to go get things bootstrapped. And we're also working very closely hand in hand with partners. So if you do have a partner or an SI partner that you work with, then we're going to partner with them as well to make that a smooth experience. You can go ahead and get started on that one today at azure.com, whack Fast Track. And in fact, my Fast Track team is actually over at the booth, and they're very, very interested in talking to people. And I can tell you there's limited slots to get going, so definitely sign up quick, and we're going to continue to expand that as we go. So with that, we got a fantastic sessions for you, great speakers, hopefully some really cool stuff. Thank you so much.